never should be made. Terrible. But that's what I do. I make the things that nobody else would make.
When Mel Brooks finally unlatched the door to his quiet, hidden mansion, at 99 years old, the world's oldest prankster didn't have a single joke left in him. The man who made generations laugh just sat there in a silence so thick it felt alive. Across from him sat one trusted journalist, handpicked to hear the truth that would flip the Hollywood story upside down. Rob wasn't just murdered, Mel said slowly. He was sacrificed. His voice trembled, not from age, but from years of rage and heartbreak. To the world, Mel Brooks is a legend. But to Rob Reiner, he was Uncle Mel, a second father who'd been there since diapers, the man who cheered him from meathead to movie master. When Carl Reiner passed, it was Mel who filled that empty seat at the family table. He whispered that he was thankful his best friend didn't live to see what came next. Because Mel saw it all, the downfall that stretched decades. He watched Nick Reiner not as a lost son battling demons, but as a manipulator who twisted his parents' endless love into a weapon. While headlines blamed mental illness, Mel pointed his shaking finger right at the heart of the problem. Parents too scared to say no. He wasn't speaking to mourn the dead, he was speaking to warn the living. When he began his testimony, Mel didn't start with talk of weapons or police files. He started with guilt. Sitting in that armchair surrounded by trophies and old movie posters, his hands trembled. Not from age, but from fury held in for years. To the cameras, the events of December 14th looked like a tragic breakdown. One more Hollywood tragedy. But Mel's eyes glistened with tears as he cut through the lies. This wasn't sudden, and it wasn't madness. We all saw it coming for 10 years, and we let it happen because we loved Rob too much to stop him. That's the part that burns. Mel described not a monster, but a home slowly falling apart from the inside. He shared one memory that still haunted him, a Sunday afternoon, just 6 months ago. Rob had come by, keeping up the sacred weekly visit he'd continued since his father Carl's passing. But that day was different. The man who once made the Princess Bride smile across the world wasn't eating, wasn't laughing. He was pacing the room, glancing over his shoulder like a hunted man. Mel said Rob's voice cracked when he finally confessed. Nick was back. After another failed stay at an upscale rehab, he had returned to the Brentwood estate. But this time, everything felt different. The air was thick. The peace was gone. Mel said it wasn't a father welcoming home a broken son. It was a man realizing the danger living under his own roof. They still called him the boy, even though he was 33. But this so-called boy wasn't just using again. He was spiraling. Delusional, explosive, and full of rage that came wrapped in entitlement. The situation had gone from heartbreaking to horrifying. And then came the detail that froze Mel's blood cold. Rob confessed he had started locking his bedroom door at night. Just imagine that. Rob Reiner, the man who directed The American Dream, the perfectionist who could demand 30 takes just to capture one perfect emotional beat, was now living like a prisoner in his own house. The man who once controlled entire movie sets, guiding actors, managing millions, shaping stories that moved the world, couldn't control the chaos under his own roof. Inside his walls, the director had lost the script. He was trapped in a real-life thriller he didn't write, forced to play a man terrified of his own son. The irony was brutal. The same man who taught the world how to talk about love, pain, and understanding was now locking himself away just to avoid speaking to his own flesh and blood. When Mel, shaken, asked the only question that made sense, "Why don't you call the police? Why not get a restraining order?" Rob's answer hit like a gravestone falling shut. He whispered, "I promised Michelle I wouldn't give up on him. If I throw him out, he dies on the street. If I keep him here, maybe I can save him." Mel said he lost it right there. He slammed his hand against the armrest and shouted, warning Rob he wasn't saving his son, he was harboring him. "You're keeping a hostage-taker under your roof," he yelled. But Rob's stubborn streak, famous, legendary, the same grit that made him a Hollywood icon, kicked in hard. That Reiner determination that once made movies soar was now digging his own grave. Rob believed that love could protect him. He believed patience was strength. But Mel saw what Rob couldn't, that to someone lost in manipulation and rage, patience looks like weakness. That afternoon, Mel watched his old friend shrink before his eyes. The sparkle that once drew crowds to his sets had dimmed, replaced by the heavy fog of fear and guilt. Mel called it the Hollywood disease. That fatal illusion that money, therapy, or endless chances can fix anything. The idea that if you just invest enough heart, You'll get the perfect ending. Rob, ever the director, thought he could stage manage redemption. He believed if the lighting was right, the support steady, and the timing perfect, Nick's story could still turn around. The most shocking part of Mel's confession wasn't the physical danger Rob lived under. It was the twisted psychological torture that came before it. Behind the glamour, behind the Castle Rock empire and the millions, was a nightmare no amount of money could fix. Mel said that in the last 2 years, the Reiners' fortune had turned into a weapon, and Nick was the one pulling the trigger. It wasn't just emotional exhaustion anymore, it was financial bleeding too. Not because Rob and Michelle were struggling, but because the pressure never stopped. The demands were non-stop, ruthless. Nick wasn't begging for help, he was demanding repayment. Mel said the words still make his blood run cold. Nick had found a way to turn his parents' love and guilt into a business plan. He used his father's compassion against him. He took Rob's famous liberal ideals, his empathy, his open heart, and twisted them into a rope around his neck. Nick told them his failures, his addiction, his misery were all the result of their success. He argued that his trauma wasn't just emotional, it was financial. He wanted millions as compensation for his pain. And here's what Mel couldn't get over. Nick's tactics were disturbingly clever. For someone so sick, his moves were sharp, deliberate, almost calculated. Mel described the pattern like a dark ritual. Rob would show up at Mel's house, eyes red and hands shaking, showing him texts filled with venom, messages dripping with hate and blame. And yet the very next day, Rob would fold. He'd buy Nick a car, or lease him a luxury apartment, or fund some creative project that never actually existed. Mel called it the transaction of guilt. Rob kept paying, thinking if he just gave enough, maybe, just maybe, Nick would calm down. He thought love could be bought in payments. He thought the ransom would free him from his own son, but all it did was chain him tighter. Mel said it broke his heart to watch his oldest friend trade his peace of mind for temporary silence. He thought he was saving him, Mel muttered, but he was paying for his own destruction. And then came the night that still haunts Mel, the last Christmas gathering. It was small, cozy, family only. But Mel said the air in that room was suffocating. The smiles were forced, the laughter brittle. Everyone pretended things were normal. But Mel wasn't fooled. He saw the way Nick looked at his father, that cold, calculating stare that didn't belong to a son. He said Rob cracked a joke, one of those classic Reiner one-liners that used to make everyone in Hollywood grin. The room laughed out of habit, except Nick. Nick didn't even blink. He just stared. His face was blank, stone cold. No humor, no emotion, just quiet contempt. Mel swore that silence chilled him to his bones. It wasn't the look of a son, he said. It was the look of a predator sizing up his prey. That image never left him. Later that night, Mel couldn't hold back anymore. He waited until the noise faded and pulled Rob aside into the hallway. He reenacted the moment for the reporter, grabbing the air like he was holding Rob's shoulders again, desperate. He said his voice cracked when he told Rob the hardest truth of his life. "Robbie, you need to get him out. He doesn't look at you with love. He looks at you with ownership." That's what Mel told him, gripping his shoulders tight, staring into eyes that didn't want to see the truth. It was one of those moments where the fog lifted and everything became painfully clear. Nick didn't want a father. He wanted access. He wanted the fame, the fortune, the open doors, but none of the grind, none of the responsibility. But Rob, brilliant, gentle, and heartbreakingly stubborn, stepped back, wounded. His pride kicked in. The denial had become his comfort zone. He looked at Mel, the man who'd practically raised him, and said bitterly, "You sound like the critics. You don't know him like I do. He's in pain." That was the moment Mel broke. In the interview, his voice cracked as he recalled it. Tears streaming, not just for Rob's death, but for the death of truth itself. He had watched the boy he'd helped raise choose illusion over survival. Rob walked right back into that room to protect a son already sharpening his blade, while Mel stood frozen in the hallway, holding a prophecy that would soon explode into reality. Then Mel's tone shifted, from sorrow to fury. His trembling hands turned into fists as he unleashed decades of bottled-up anger, not at Nick this time, but at Hollywood itself. He turned his wrath on what he called the machine, the therapists, consultants, and so-called experts who surrounded the Reiner family like a paid army. He didn't sugarcoat it. He called them accomplices. Mel claimed that Rob didn't just create his denial, he bought it. For years, a parade of professionals kept the peace by feeding him what he wanted to hear. Whenever Rob confessed his fear or Michelle begged to cut ties, the experts swooped in with polished smiles and buzzwords from the latest therapy trend. They told him tough love was outdated. They pushed radical acceptance, convincing him that boundaries were cruelty. Nick's violent outbursts weren't treated as danger. They were labeled as cries for help. Each breakdown became another billable hour. Each meltdown became another excuse to prescribe patience, and of course, to spend more money. Mel described it as the sterilization of danger. He said those professionals didn't just minimize the threat, they sanitized it. They took a man showing signs of cruelty, Mel growled, and wrapped it in medical terms. They called it a disorder. They called it neurodivergence. Then Mel's voice dropped low. So low the reporter said it felt like a curse. They told him it was a disorder. They didn't tell him it was a death sentence. That line hit like thunder, because Mel wasn't just talking about one family. He was calling out an entire culture. This, he said, is the tragedy of the rich. In an ordinary home, if a son threatens his parents, you call the cops. But in the Reiner mansion, they called a team. Therapists, PR handlers, life coaches, to de-escalate and manage optics. They treated a potential tragedy like a public relations problem. Mel said these enablers didn't just fail Rob, they fed the delusion. They played his heart like a violin. They told him, if you throw Nick out, he'll die, and it'll be your fault. They twisted his compassion into guilt, weaponized his conscience, and convinced him that protecting himself was betrayal. They told him, your son isn't evil, he's just sick. Mel spat those words like poison. That single line, he said, fed the rot that was already spreading through the Rainers' Brentwood mansion. On the outside, it looked flawless. The perfect Hollywood postcard. The lawns trimmed to perfection, Christmas lights being strung, the family legacy shining like polished gold. But inside, the walls were crumbling. The truth was being buried under money, denial, and professional lies. Mel compared it to a cancer misdiagnosed as a cold because the doctors were too greedy or too scared to tell the truth. And what burns him most now is the silence. Where are those experts who swore that radical acceptance was the key? Where are the therapists who told Rob to keep forgiving, to keep understanding, to keep funding? Nowhere. They vanished the second Rob's blood hit the ground. Mel said they left behind nothing but invoices and a philosophy that ended in tragedy. Rob Reiner had spent his whole life putting faith in professionals. On set, he trusted cinematographers to light the perfect shot, writers to build perfect dialogue, and when it came to his family, he trusted doctors to save his son. But this time, the experts failed him. They protected the process, not the people. They saved their careers, Mel said bitterly, and they let Rob die. Mel wants the world to understand. The knife may have been in Nick's hand, but the path to that bedroom was cleared long before. Cleared by consultants, by therapists, by an industry too afraid to tell wealthy parents one simple word. No. It's a brutal truth, but Mel isn't hiding it. He called it a system addicted to comfort, one that teaches people to buy therapy instead of setting boundaries. His voice trembled with rage as he described the sickness of that culture, the belief that money and mindfulness can fix everything. Not every kind of darkness can be cured, he said. Some kinds, you just have to survive. The police report from that night, December 14th, reads cold and mechanical. Time of death, point of entry, blood patterns. The paperwork gives no soul to the story. It tells us how Rob Reiner died, but Mel Brooks knows why. Because before the silence swallowed Brentwood, the phone rang one last time. It was late. Mel was in bed, wrapped in quiet memories of a century lived. When the phone buzzed, he almost ignored it. 99 years old. After midnight calls rarely mean good news. But something deep inside, the instinct that had tied him to the Reiner family for 70 years, told him to answer. He picked up, and on the other end was a whisper. The voice of the man who once commanded, sets with thunderous confidence, was now trembling, broken. Mel, Rob whispered. He's spiraling again. Mel froze. The weight in Rob's voice told him everything. Then came the words that shattered him. He's screaming about the will. He thinks we're cutting him out. That was it. The breaking point. The financial manipulation Mel had warned about for years had finally turned deadly. Nick wasn't just lashing out. He was staging a takeover. He had convinced himself that his parents were thieves stealing his future, and that night, he came to collect. Mel said his blood turned to ice. There was no joke left, no wisecrack to soften the fear. The man who spent his life making the world laugh could only manage one final direction. His last command to the boy he'd loved like his own son. His voice went firm, desperate, almost shouting through the phone. "Get in the car, Robbie, right now! Just drive, come here, don't stay in that house," Mel shouted through the phone, his voice shaking with fear. It was the only move that made sense. Run, get out, save yourself, and let the cops handle the rest. But this wasn't just another Hollywood scandal anymore. It was turning into a full-blown tragedy straight out of Greek myth. On the other end, there was silence. Thick, unbearable silence. Mel could almost hear Rob thinking, the gears of loyalty and love grinding against survival. After a long pause, Rob spoke, voice cracking like glass. "I can't leave, Mel. Michelle's in the room with him. She's trying to calm him down. If I leave, he'll turn it all on her." That sentence hung in the air like smoke from a fire no one could put out. Rob knew. He knew the danger. He knew the fury burning in his son's eyes. He knew that every second counted. And yet, he made the kind of choice only love could force. He chose to be a husband before he chose to be a survivor. Mel begged, pleaded for him to grab Michelle and run. "Get her out, Robbie, please," he yelled, but Rob's silence said it all. It was too late. The storm inside that house had already broken loose. To step away meant leaving her behind with a ticking time bomb, and that Rob could never do. So he did the bravest, most heartbreaking thing a man can do. He hung up the phone, not to escape, but to walk back in. Back toward the shouting, the madness, the danger, toward the son he loved and the wife he couldn't abandon. That simple click, the sound of the line going dead, is the noise that still shatters Mel's sleep every night. That was the end, not just of a phone call, but of a dynasty, the final act of a story that began with laughter and ended in blood and silence. The news later framed Nick as a storm, a chaotic, uncontrollable force of nature that destroyed everything in his path. But Mel refuses that version. He wasn't a storm, he said. He made choices. And Rob Reiner? He didn't die cowering in fear. He died standing in the gap. He died trying to defuse a war he never wanted, facing the fury head-on, protecting the woman he loved. And that's the real heartbreak. His sacrifice didn't save her. He walked back in to protect Michelle. And Nick took them both. For Mel Brooks, that moment, the helplessness of it, will never fade. He's a man who spent a lifetime fixing things, fixing punchlines, fixing scripts, fixing scenes, fixing people. But that night, holding that phone, listening to the dial tone hum in the dark, he realized he couldn't fix this. He couldn't rewrite this ending. The director was gone, the script had shattered, and the villains had taken over the stage. As Mel sat frozen in the dark, clutching the phone, he felt the weight of finality sink in. He knew, with a gut-deep certainty, that he would never hear Robbie's voice again. That single click didn't just end a call. It triggered the explosion of a resentment that had been festering for decades. Mel Brooks sat frozen in his dim living room, the phone still in his hand, the silence pressing down like a weight he could barely breathe under. When he finally spoke to the reporter, his voice trembled, but his message was clear. To understand this murder, you have to look past the madness and see the envy. The headlines love to call Nick a chaotic force, a lost soul swallowed by addiction. But Mel cut through that story like a knife. This wasn't just about drugs, he said. It was about the shadow. To be born a Reiner was supposed to be a blessing, a golden ticket. Carl Reiner defined comedy. Rob Reiner defined cinema. And then came Nick, the third generation, standing in the dark, staring up at a mountain already conquered. The spotlight was there, but it didn't belong to him, and no matter how hard he reached for it, it never landed. Mel's tone turned heavy with both pity and anger. He said Nick had talent, sure. He had a spark, a voice. But he lacked the one trait that made his father and grandfather legends, grit. He wanted the applause, Mel said, his voice tightening, but not the grind that earns it. When the industry didn't hand him what he thought he deserved, he didn't look inward. He blamed the shadow. He convinced himself that Rob's success had stolen his future, that he was doomed to live in someone else's story. That's the kind of twisted thinking Mel had seen eat up Hollywood kids before. But never this violently. Nick didn't just envy his father's greatness. He hated him for it. He wanted to punish him for shining too bright. In his warped mind, Rob's legacy wasn't a ladder, it was a cage. And Nick believed that if he could just snuff out the light of his parents, maybe then, finally, he'd see his own reflection. But Mel made one thing crystal clear: the rot didn't grow on its own. As the interview neared its end, Mel's trembling hand shot out, gripping the journalist's arm with sudden urgency. His eyes, old but fierce, burned as he said, "There's one more truth you need to write, the one nobody wants to print." He wasn't talking about the doctors this time. He was talking about the friends. Mel exposed a circle of parasites, leeches who orbited around Nick like vultures waiting for scraps. These weren't mentors or companions. They were enablers who fed his delusions of grandeur. They partied on Rob's dime, whispered in Nick's ear, and fanned his fury just enough to keep the money flowing. They kept him angry because it paid their bills, Mel growled. They told him he was the victim, that his parents were the villains. They made him feel righteous in his rage. Every toxic whisper, every validation of his bitterness, it all built the fire that finally exploded. Nick may have held the weapon that night, but Mel's voice cracked as he delivered the final accusation. A lot of people helped him sharpen that blade. Mel wants them unmasked, every single one. He wants the world to see that while Rob Reiner was breaking himself trying to save his son, there was a chorus of sycophants whispering poison into Nick's mind. You're the victim. You deserve more. They're the problem. From the street, the Brentwood mansion looked perfect. Spotless lawns, perfect hedges, glowing lights. But inside, the foundation was rotting, eaten alive by jealousy, greed, and the lies that bought everyone silence. The Christmas lights were probably ready to glow that night. Perfect bulbs, perfect symmetry, perfect illusion. But behind those twinkling decorations, a storm had already destroyed the foundation. The Reiner home wasn't brought down by fate. It was taken apart. A demolition disguised as a tragedy, aided by people who smiled, drank the wine, and called themselves friends. The interview with Mel didn't end in some dramatic explosion. It ended in a slow, heartbroken sigh. Mel turned toward the window, staring out at the California sunlight that felt almost offensive in its brightness. His body looked frail, but his eyes still burned. The century-old comedian who once lived to make people laugh had nothing left to hide behind. I'm done protecting the secrets, he said softly. I'm done protecting the image. It's time to protect the truth. And the truth, as Mel Brooks tells it, is brutal. Rob Reiner didn't just die. He was consumed by the very life he tried to save. The dynasty that built legends had collapsed under its own kindness. And the lesson Mel is leaving behind isn't just for Hollywood. It's for every parent, every friend, every soul watching this right now. The message flooding the comments online says it best. Enabling is not love. Mel Brooks, with a century of wisdom behind his words, is confirming what many have whispered for years. Rob Reiner's heart was huge, but love without limits isn't love. It's a slow-motion self-destruction. You can't hug a storm and expect to stay standing. You can't radically accept your way out of rage. When Nick Reiner sits in that courtroom this January, don't just see the mugshot or the headline. See the story behind it. The decades of silence, of ignored warnings, of love that tried too hard to heal what didn't want healing. See Mel Brooks, 99 years old, sitting in his armchair, weeping for the little boy he once bounced on his knee, and for the best friend he couldn't save. Because the truth isn't always found in a police report. It lives in the small moments. Those quiet, deadly choices. The doors left unlocked because a father couldn't bear to shut them against his own child. It lives in the warnings swallowed to keep peace, and in the guilt that grows when love becomes a trap. Mel's silence is broken now, and the echo of it will haunt this town for years. It's a reminder that even those who write the happiest endings on screen can be living through their own personal nightmares behind closed doors. Rob Reiner's name will live on through his films, yes, but thanks to Mel Brooks, it will also live on as a warning, carved deep into Hollywood's heart. Because this isn't just about one family, it's about the danger of mercy when it's misplaced, the kindness that turns deadly when it replaces boundaries. Mel leaves us with a question that burns like a match in the dark. At what point does saving your child become destroying yourself? And now, I want to hear from you. Do you think the system failed this family? Do you believe that tough love might have been the only thing that could have saved Rob and Michelle? Let's talk about it in the comments below, because this conversation matters. Somewhere out there right now, another family is living behind a locked door, praying it won't open to a nightmare. This was the story Mel Brooks needed to tell, and the story we all needed to hear, no matter how much it hurts. Because at the end of the day, truth is the only thing that honors the dead. Rest in peace, Rob and Michelle Reiner. The curtain has fallen, the laughter has faded, but the lesson will echo forever. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more stories that uncover the hidden truths behind Hollywood's brightest lights. And I'll see you in the next video.